Today, I'm going to be reviewing the entire new JOOLA Pro V lineup, and this is a pretty interesting one as the Pro 4 was one of the hottest selling paddles of all of last year. And they've made an incremental adjustment. They did not go Gen 4 with this release. They actually stayed with the Gen 3 honeycomb design, and there's actually some interesting thought behind this. One, a lot of people still like Gen 3 paddles. A lot of pros are still more prone to playing with Gen 3 paddles, and the understanding around how to make a really good Gen 4 paddle that has a really nice ball feel is still being discovered. So the new Pro 5 lineup, what did they change? Well, the big thing is they changed how the body of the paddle is essentially flexing. So whereas previous iterations either had a trampoline effect in the middle of the paddle, or they were doing a diving board effect like we see with the RPM Friction Pro, where it's essentially flexing the entire face back and forth, the JOOLAs have gone with a different energy deployment, where essentially, think of the paddle face being here and the handle being here, the entire face is shifting off in a linear fashion so that the tip isn't going away. And the thinking behind this is that it's going to create more consistent deployment, with the angle being more consistent to where you're actually aiming the ball, which actually makes sense. So I'm going to deep dive on the entire lineup. This is going to be a long video. I'm giving you a warning right now. So if you want to jump ahead to the exact paddle that you're looking for, the timestamps will be in the description down below. But we're going to be going over the Ben Johns Perseus, the 14 and 16 mil. We're going to be going over the Anna Bright 14 and 16 mil Scorpius. Also the Colin Johns Scorpius. They are both basically the exact same thing. The only difference between the Colin Johns Scorpius and the Anna Bright Scorpius is the fact that the Anna Bright has a thinner handle and the Colin Johns has a thicker handle. We also have the Agassi, which is, if you're a tennis player, probably your go-to paddle right now because it's the closest that you'll get to a tennis racket in a pickleball paddle. And we also have the new shape that is kind of almost superseding the Hyperion, which was their hybrid shape that they had before, which is really just an elongated paddle with the top corners shaved off. But now they actually have a true hybrid shape. And the 14 mil is Tyson McGuffin's pro model, and the 16 mil is Federico Staksrud's pro model. And that is actually a true hybrid, as I said. And that one intrigues me a lot because they haven't had that before. No one really knows what it plays like. So I'm gonna hop on the court, test all of these out, give you my initial thoughts. This is just me grabbing them right out of the box, no waiting, no overgrips, no nothing. Exactly how you'd buy it. That's what I'm gonna be going over today. But yeah, let's get into it and see how these paddles play. All right, so the first paddle I have up is the most popular one from last year, the Ben Johns Perseus 16 mil. So this one, I was not a huge fan of the Pro 4, if I'm being honest. I found that it was too stiff off the face, didn't really like the sensation, the ball feel off of it. I found it very unforgiving. Whereas this one, I feel like I get a lot more shape off the ball. And it's quite interesting how you can actually feel the paddle flexing with their new mechanism. It does feel much more consistent, almost feels like a snap when it's coming through, and it's not like a diving board effect where you feel the top of the paddle going away from you. This one feels a lot more consistent. The shape on the ball is really nice. Your ability to switch between hard drives and soft drops with really good spin is really great. And the fact that this paddle is completely stock and it still plays this well is really nice. And the fact that they made this one a little bit lighter from stock than the Pro 4 means that you can weight it up and personalize it should you want to. But this is a paddle that I would say you can grab right out of the box and start playing with right away, no problem whatsoever. So the 14 millimeter Perseus is a paddle that I didn't play much in the Pro 4 variant, just because I found it exceptionally stiff with very little forgiveness. But this paddle is marginally better. I would still say it's definitely a stiff paddle off the face, definitely stiffer than the 16 mil Pro 5. But the fact that this is a stock 14 millimeter paddle with a very large sweet spot that you can switch between driving the ball with a lot of power and dropping it quite easily is very impressive. I think they've done a very good job on this paddle. So if you like a stiffer, lighter 14 mil paddle, it's going to be a great option. I don't feel that same snapping effect that I did on the 16 mil. That being said, it can get a lot of power. It definitely has more plow through on the ball, at least from my first impressions here. But the consistency with how these paddles deploy is very nice. Some people don't like the diving board effects from some other paddles because that kind of flexing back and forth can throw some people off. But this definitely feels like a more linear experience, which translates to you likely being a bit more consistent on the court. So the Agassi was a paddle that I actually did not play very much with in the Pro 5 generation. Just wasn't a paddle that intrigued me very much. But if you want an elongated shape with a little bit more of a tennis style, this is probably your go-to option. And first impressions, I actually would say that this is a little bit softer on the face, a little bit easier to control, definitely a little bit more dwell time than the Perseus 16 mil, and you get more shape. I would say that the drops on this paddle are actually way easier than the Perseus. The consistency with how the paddle is deploying that power is pretty impressive, if I'm being honest. This is something that I did not expect to like this paddle, but I really like it. The one thing that I would say I'd have to get used to is just the shape of it. The shape is definitely different. The throat shape is something that with my Tui I would have to take some adjusting to. But first impressions of this paddle, really nice. So if you like the Perseus, but you want a little bit more dwell time, a little bit more control, maybe a little bit bigger sweet spot, the Agassi 16 is a very good option. But you're not lacking in power at all, that's for sure. So shifting over to the wide body shape now, we have the Anna Bright 14 mil. As I mentioned at the beginning, they actually have a Scorpius for both Anna Bright and Colin Johns, each in a 14 and a 16 mil. The only difference between the two is that the Anna Bright has a thinner handle and the Colin Johns has a thicker handle. And the Scorpius was actually my favorite Pro 4 model. I really liked the way it felt. I thought that the sweet spot was fantastic. It had a lot of power, but a really good forgiving paddle from stock that actually didn't need any weighting. And the 14 mil that I'm hitting with right now, the Anna Bright, I would say follows suit with that. It actually has a massive sweet spot, really nice dwell time, really nice shape on the ball. Again, your ability to transition between harder shots and softer shots is very, very simple. But I would say that this paddle has quite a bit less power than the Agassi and definitely less power than the Perseus. And though this is a 14 millimeter paddle, I actually find that it has almost a 16 mil feel to it in terms of the forgiveness, the sweet spot. But yeah, if you're looking for probably one of the most consistent paddles with the lightest weight, easiest to swing, and probably great at the net, this would be the one that I would kind of suggest you to look at. And then switching over to the 16 mil Colin Johns Scorpius, this paddle actually doesn't feel that much different than the 14 mil. There's marginally more dwell time because of the thicker paddle, but nothing that I would say is super noticeable like you would see on some other 14 versus 16 mil paddles. And to me, I actually like the slightly thicker handle, but that's very much a personal preference thing. But yeah, overall, very similar characteristics between the two. And then you just have to decide whether you want a little bit lighter with the 14, that might be a little bit stiffer, slightly stiffer, or you go with the 16 that has a little bit more dwell time and maybe a little bit less pop than you'd get with the 14. But both have very good power. Obviously, the whip effect of this one, like how the face is flexing, is not going to be as dramatic just because you don't have as much leverage on a wide body as you do an elongated. But definitely no slouch in the power department, and spin actually quite good as well. Now switching over to the new shape, the Kosmos. So this is the 14 mil, and this is Tyson McGuffin's Pro model. So this is their first true hybrid shape in the Pro 4, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And overall, I actually have to say that this 14 mil Kosmos might be one of my favorite feels. It's definitely has a nice mixture of stiff but dwell, if that makes any sense. Meaning that the ball sits into the face a little bit, but it also has a stiffer deployment as you would expect from a 14 mil paddle. That being said, power, no problem. Shape, super easy to produce. Going and switching to your drops, getting it right into the kitchen, no problem. Spin, I would say, is pretty solid. I wouldn't put it into the same realm as like an RPM Friction Pro or Spartus P1, but definitely not lacking in the spin department at all. And the weight of this paddle is really nice. If you want something that's going to be quick in the hands, especially at the net, it's a great option, but it also feels very stable when hitting hard drives. And then switching over to the 16 mil Kosmos. So this is Federico Staksrud's Pro model. And this one has more compression into the face. Right away, I feel it compared to the 14 mil Kosmos. Can definitely feel the ball sitting into the face more. Still great power deployment. I would actually say that this one, in terms of power and shape, could be my top one beside the Agassi 16. I really like the way that this sits in the face, the way that it's using the new flex mechanism to deploy that power, and I can just hit the same spot over and over again. Don't have to worry about swinging too big like you do on some other power paddles, but also instantaneously switching to a very soft touch is, again, very impressive. It's going to be tough. Which one of these am I going to put at the top of my bag? I don't know, but it could be this Kosmos 16. And again, the weighting allows you to have a margin that if you want to put some weights on it, you absolutely could. But from stock, I actually really like the sensation that this paddle gives, and it's just a very confidence-inspiring paddle where you're hitting the same spot over and over again, and I think that has to do with the way that the paddle is flexing. All right, so I'm done going through my initial impressions on the JOOLA Pro V lineup, and I have to say they did a good job. And if you know me at all, it actually takes a lot for me to say that about JOOLA. I've historically thought they were very overpriced, underperforming, and very unreliable for the price that you were paying, but I think that they've done a great job on all of this lineup. So the Perseus, fantastic elongated paddle, whether you want the 14 or 16, I think you'll really gravitate towards it with immense power, really good control, a really nice feel off the face, a little bit less stiff than the Pro 4 was. The wide body, the Scorpius, both the Colin Johns and the Anna Bright, really nice paddle, especially if you're more prone to a wide body paddle and you liked the Pro 4 Scorpius, you will like these. They are a marginal improvement. I wouldn't say there's a massive difference between the Pro 4 Scorpius and the Pro 5 Scorpius, but they have iterated on it in a meaningful way that I think is a good improvement. The Agassi really impressed me. I think that's a fantastic paddle that if you want a more tennis-like feel in your elongated paddle, that's probably the one that you're going to gravitate towards. Great power, a little bit more dwell time than the Perseus. Very impressed with that. They also have the Steffi Graph, but I didn't get to review that one today, but that one's also available. And the Kosmos, the new shape, the hybrid, I think they nailed this one. I think they have really rounded out the entire lineup by having a true hybrid paddle, and both the 14 and the 16 play exceptionally well, and then it's just kind of deciding which play style do you prefer. It'll be very interesting to see if the reliability of the Pro 5s holds up better than the Pro 4, because they have actually gone ahead and put a carbon fiber, basically a shield, around the top of the honeycomb where the foam and the honeycomb meets to hopefully stop some of that core crushing that was very, very prominent on the Pro 4s. But I'd love to know your thoughts. Is this a paddle that you're looking at? Which of these paddles? And if you did want to pick one up, you can head over to the Ontario Pickleball Academy. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below and anything that you want to know as I do my long-term review on these.